Hey everyone, Kate Bora and Fiona Pearman joining you for this week's Facebook Live, where we're continuing our conversation around this year's International Women's Day theme, Count Her In, and economic empowerment. Specifically, we've been talking about the gender pay gap and workforce participation. And today we really want to dig into how us as individual women can really start to move the dial at a grassroots level to impact some of the outcomes that we see in our country when it comes to workforce participation and equally the gender pay gap. And I think the first place we want to start is really raising our individual awareness. We've talked about issues at a societal level, at a government level, things in roles in organisations, things that leaders can do to really drive change in this area. But raising our own awareness around assumptions that we are making around if I work a lower level role, potentially there'll be less stress. We know that many times, and we've seen this recently in the last week when we've been recruiting for a part-time person in our role, lots of stories of women sharing around why potentially they actually have significantly more senior capability, skill, experience in terms of what could be possible for them, but actually they're seeking out a lower level part-time remote role for various different reasons.
I think this is really interesting to us. We know that there are big things afoot and we need to do much at a macro level. And there's so much that's going on at a micro level, an individual level that we can pick up on. And we think this is really important to bring these two things together, to be having all of these conversations at once. I was talking with a friend last week who had gone from having 3 days was her role to expanding that to 5 days. And it was so interesting to her to realize a whole lot of things that have been playing out. She'd assumed that, working more hours would mean more pressure, all of this sort of thing. And actually, she found it meant less. She had more time and space to do things, was more able to achieve some of the goals, but she actually had more time for things in her personal life as well, which seems kind of counterintuitive. But this is often where our assumptions and our default beliefs around what's possible and not is getting in the way of thinking about things in maybe a little bit more creative way.
Yeah, I think as we raise our awareness around some of these beliefs, the opportunity then is to actually get clear about what you do want. Plenty of these women that I was speaking to initially, and many, I asked the question why they were pitching themselves so low. To our ability to get clear about what we are looking for and for what purpose, right? What are the reasons and rationales? So that when you do go looking for those roles, that you are going to get the workplace experience or outcome that you think you're going to, particularly if you are making compromise in terms of the sort of role, like the level of seniority, or if you are making compromise in terms of REM, or you are making compromise in terms of the hours that you're working, whether that's more or less, whatever is what you want, that will align with the workplace experience. Again, particularly in that interview process, I see a lot of people making assumptions that often don't play out in terms of the workplace experience. I think the other thing that we really ask the women specifically, and we do this in our work in the Acts of Confidence program, but I asked many of the women I spoke to last week was really to dig in to be able to articulate their value. There were many, women I spoke to who had come to Australia, and so we're looking for, had incredible international experience, quite frankly, that is very valuable in this country, and were, seeking lower level roles to get their foot in the Australian workplace as well. And so I think just our ability to understand our value, it is, and articulate that is hard. There is no question. And in our experience, there's work to be done because for us, many women overestimate what's required to do a good job in a role. And so there's work to be done to align that. And many women underestimate their own skill, capability, experience. So what we end up with is a big gap in terms of what I think I can do and what is required of the role, and our ability to right size what's required and actually upscale and articulate and align our values so we can talk about it means that actually we're more than ready to do some of the roles that might be of interest to us.
Yeah, I think this is something that for us is a bit heartbreaking. You know, we interact with women every day. We're in our program, we're talking to women, and we see women undervaluing what they bring to the table, that they are diminishing or they're not clear or they haven't found a way to communicate all of their great skill, all of the talent, all of their contribution. And because of that, they're underplaying and underselling their value. And we know that this is leading in part to our gender pay gap. There's lots of other structural issues, but this is part of it too. Being able to stand in our power and own what it is we bring is incredibly important piece to the whole puzzle. I think the next thing we want to dive into is really encouraging you, us, women as individual, to challenge what is possible. If you notice that you're not having the conversation, whether that's upfront in the recruitment process or, you know, you potentially are due for a salary increase, you can see your roles expanded, you're doing more. Just notice the ways in which you're either moving towards or you're engaging with those opportunities, or potentially you're contracting and self-selecting out, quite frankly, of the opportunities that are available because you've made a whole lot of assumptions and decisions about what's possible. And I think for us, we know that we are constantly in contact with women who could be in far more senior roles, who could be at those more senior tables, and they've decided, oh, it's too hard to do, to your point earlier, Kate. And so they're taking a step back rather than advancing their career because of a whole lot of ideas they have about what that will mean.
Equally, we're working with women, right, in Acts of Confidence, who, and I got a note from one of our alumni earlier this week, right, who had put herself forward for an opportunity. She was someone who had been out of the workforce, the traditional workforce, for 10 years, raising children. She'd been involved in many organisations from a voluntary capacity, but this is the first time she was putting herself back out there in exchange for salary. And she said to me, you know, I realised I'd underpitched myself, so I went back and I negotiated an additional $30,000. And so, yes, all of that is awkward and weird and uncomfortable, but the willingness to recognize, raise our awareness that even she had underpitched herself, do the work to align and recognize and own her value, and then to step back in and challenge what is possible. Of course, she could have gotten a no. She could have gotten a not now. She could have gotten a not that. And she got a different outcome and is earning $30,000 more a year than she would have had she not been willing to take all of those steps around being aware and challenging the assumptions she's making, actually getting clear and owning her value, active confidence number 1 and number 2. And then really, I guess, leaning into some of the fear and the awkwardness that comes up as we do have, you know, conversations around remuneration are sticky. We later today, last week we did a session on negotiation. We're doing one today. We see and hear many women through our programs and our work who are particularly uncomfortable about negotiating remuneration or really leaning into conversations around promotions and progression opportunities. And we need to do it anyway.
Yeah, and I think this is the big opportunity. Once we have some awareness, once we've got that clarity, once we know the value we bring, we can, as the example you've just given, take action. And this is, again, often one of the things that holds people back. I mean, we know that the act of confidence comes before the feeling. And so being willing to step in and take some action that will likely feel uncomfortable and different to things you've done before. And we see results every single day where women have done this and their world is better. It's maybe better financially, it's better structurally, it's better. They've got more time for the things that are important to them. They're actually, you know, doing the role at the level that they're capable of. And so what we'd encourage you to do is, if you notice this is, what's the action you can take right now? What's the conversation you can get into with your leader? Perhaps it's about getting more information about what's required in the role. Perhaps it's about doing a secondment into a more senior role and seeing how that goes. Perhaps it's about having good conversations with a project manager about what it would take to be part of that project team. Whatever's in your world that could expand you that little bit and give you some opportunity that you're currently deciding is not available to you, that's what we'd love you to do as a result of listening in today.
Yeah, so if you've enjoyed today's confidence conversation, or we've talked about some things that potentially really resonating with you, reach out to us. Lots of videos for you to dig into around the topic over the last month over on our Facebook page. And if you'd like to find out more about working with us, head over to our website, coreconfidence.com.au. Lots of client stories sharing their acts of confidence journey that I'm sure will resonate with you as well.